Well, good evening, everyone. It is July 13th at 6:30, and this is the monthly meeting of Fitchburg's Transportation and Transit Commission. Call the meeting to order, and we do have one introduction who will be with us from now on. Ross is our new city transportation engineer. He was a transportation projects engineer. Something like
just project engineer.
Project engineer previously, but he'll be taking over for Tim as our staff contact. That role usually staffs this commission, and Tim has been filling in while the role has been vacant. So welcome, Ross. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I went to UW-Platteville, got my bachelor's in engineering there.
It's an awesome engineering school.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good education. Then I worked, first I worked at a wastewater treatment facility in the Chicago suburbs. Right after graduation, and then spent 4 years with a consulting engineering firm out of Burlington, Wisconsin, and then moved to an office in Madison. So I was doing a lot of the same or similar work for other communities there, and in January started with the city of Fitchburg in the project engineer role, and then we hired a new engineer for that role, and I moved into the transportation engineer role. So.
Glad to have you. We also have a guest, Katie Selman. Thanks for coming in to share any remarks you might have with us. And for Ross and Katie, let's just go around and introduce ourselves.
Hey, I'm Micah Lattisay, member of the board.
Steve Arnold.
Bill Horns.
Rich Tate.
Bill Jetzer.
Tim Volker, Director of Public Works, City Engineer.
And as you know, I'm Ross Kaler.
Very good. Are you here for anything not on the agenda?
I don't think so.
Okay, there are no other members of the public, so that takes care of number 2. We have on the agenda the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I move approval of the agenda.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I have some.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay, go.
There are a couple of things I would like that I want to change. I requested the discussion items, role of chair, open meetings law, ethics law. 2 of those are things that I requested for agenda items. I'd like those broken out, so we have role of the chair as an item, open meetings law is another item, separate discussion items. I don't know what you had in mind when you said ethics law, but...
Well, those are kind of companions to the open meetings law. I did not write that, but I think they're addressed by similar statutes and so on, our ordinances.
Okay. With those changes, I would move to make those changes on the agenda. So I'd be looking for a second.
So the change would be to just split them out as separate items.
Split those out as separate items.
Okay. We will call them A1, A2, and A3 if everybody is good
So
with
we have a
that.
second.
So this is on the amendment to the agenda.
All right, I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any more discussion on the main motion?
A couple questions. So number 5 says council items. Number 8A says updates from other commissions and committees, and that's the council. I guess I'm just looking for clarification on the difference between those.
Sure. I try to address that. I saw your email and I'm prepared for this.
Okay.
The council items are the resolutions and ordinances that they send us, that they refer to us for recommendation.
Okay, referrals from council.
Those are referrals. And then the reports have to do with anything that might be of interest to this body that's going on in the other body. That is why there is a council representative, and sort of unique to this committee, a plan commission representative, and Dave Wilborn will be our public works representative. So,
Okay, maybe we should change the wording on that to say referrals from council or something, so it's unambiguous.
okay.
I had one more item then.
Sure.
Number 7 says report from department, but I'm not sure what department that is. Is that?
That is the Department of Public Works, in which this commission is housed and which supports this commission.
And that's going to be different than from,
The Board of Public Works.
okay.
So oftentimes that item, number 7, is called the Director's Report. It has different names in different committees. We don't all use the same agenda template. Anything else, Bill?
Those are my 2 items.
Bill J, Bill H. Go
I
ahead.
had a request. Could we, since all my stuff's on my dining room table, could we put the agenda on the screen?
Absolutely. Can you share your screen?
Of course, this one won't be marked up.
Yeah, sorry.
I ran back in to get this.
If you lived closer, we'd send you home. All right, well, I have, go ahead.
Oh, but just a couple of things. This first, a little bit picky, I think, because we're all friends, but when you get a motion and all those approve it, you really need to say other than opposed. That sometimes is an important part of the public record.
Sure.
Not here, but it's just a procedural thing. The other thing on the agenda, there isn't an item for establishing the quorum. And I don't know if that, I mean, we do have a quorum, but it's good to formalize that so that the minutes show who was here and who's not.
Or roll
Because
call.
Roll call,
sometimes that's
yeah.
important.
Is there a roll call between 1 and 2?
What I had originally done, trying to simplify the agenda for a month ago, was I put on there, I guess it didn't make it in, but I was basically combining those into one item, which would be
Roll call.
call to order, roll call, welcome, that kind of thing. If people feel like that needs to be split out, I'm open to it.
People are squinting.
My item was to remove the approval of the agenda, and Bill felt strongly that it should stay in. So,
Bill H.
Bill H. Thank you. That'll be a hard habit to get into because I know both of you as Bill. I felt that the approval of the agenda was unnecessary, that most frequently what happens is that people make motions to amend the agenda to move things around or to delete things, very often because we don't have time to cover them. Calling it out as a separate agenda item just meant more stuff for the secretary, who is Tim and who will be Ross, to record. And when Bill and I had an email conversation, or maybe it was a phone conversation, I don't remember, about this, I went to the minutes and agendas page on the city website, and there were, at that time, 30 meetings. And of them, only ours wasn't on there, but only Park Commission had approval of the agenda, and 2 others, Tree Advisory and Plan, just had a agenda review, but didn't call out for approval of it. All the other meetings did not have that item. And I thought that it was something that was just extra process that we could handle on an exceptional basis instead of voting to approve the agenda every time. I would be very grateful for Bill's counterargument. Bill H's
I think I'm very surprised that it isn't on every agenda. It's standard procedure, I think is probably described in Robert's rules, to approve the agenda. The agenda that you prepare is a draft agenda. It's a proposed agenda of the chairman. It isn't the commission's agenda, so I think it's necessary to have a point where the commission looks at the agenda and approves it, so it's the commission's agenda. Otherwise, I don't think there is an agenda until we take that action. So I'm really surprised that this is omitted by any commission or committee, and I think it needs to be included.
As a member of the Plan Commission, it's just a pat item that is usually just whizzed through. But I would like to have a place where we can add items to the agenda, since we did not have anything to do with it. And items, usually these are items for discussion that can then lead to an action item at a future meeting. But that is the time when we want to introduce those items into the day's topics.
You don't do that ahead of time? Like,
No, what you're saying is that.
Those printed, aren't they out a week ahead? Then it's the draft.
I would jump in here. We can discuss this further under 6A, or 6A2, the open meetings law, but we really cannot add anything to the agenda. If there is something that you'd like to have on the agenda, you need to communicate it to
All right.
Ross.
That's fine.
By the agenda deadline.
That's fine.
And that way it will be noticed, and that way we can talk about it. If something comes up, we can hear testimony. For example, under public appearances for non-agenda items, we can ask questions of clarification, but we can't even discuss those because it's not on the agenda for advance notice so that the public can participate if they want.
Also number 9, that's future agenda items.
Yep.
Well, yeah, but
then
what
you
I'm
can
thinking specifically of is that somebody may corner me when I'm walking the dog and ask me about something that's going on with transportation, and I would like to bring it up, but it's not necessarily on the agenda. Maybe what we could do is just have other such matters at the end where we have a forum for bringing up those kind of things.
Yeah, that a city attorney would tell us that that's not allowed. And so if they catch you before the agenda deadline, you can tell Ross. If they catch you after, you just have to say, oh, we're not going to be able to, or you can, if it's something about what's happening in the Public Works Department or a project or some policy of the city, it doesn't have to come to the meeting. It could go to staff and get it answered. Okay, to finish this off, then I would like to hear a motion to say what you want in our agenda template. Bill?
I would, thank you for the opportunity, I would move to have a policy of always having approval of the agenda as an agenda item following establishing a quorum. So anyway, that's the motion. If we get a second, I can discuss it more.
And I can second to discuss.
Go ahead.
It was just that I think it usually is a perfunctory thing. I mean, the agenda is usually quite acceptable, it's predictable, and people look at it and say, yeah, that's fine, and we get on it. But it isn't, to allow for approval makes it the commission's agenda and it allows for amendments. It's the logical time under consideration of approving the agenda to put in amendments. I think it's just standard operating procedure for any commission or committee.
Okay, is changing number 1, call to order and roll call part of your,
Oh,
do you want to do that? I would accept that as a clarification of your amendment, or your motion.
I think those are really separate things. I think my motion is just that each agenda would have approval of the agenda as a early item on the agenda.
Okay, so any other discussion?
As long as I'm fine with either way, but as long as it doesn't go to review of agenda, I am fine with either one, because I think reviewing their agenda is redundant to actually doing the agenda that's going to happen.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say of the amendment to make that a standard item of our template, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, that passes. Thank you, Bill. And next item is approval of the minutes of our meeting 2 months ago. There are no minutes for last month due to the cancellation.
Approve.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I can second.
Okay. Is there any discussion or corrections? I saw nothing. Thank you for those minutes. Tim? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, those are approved. There is nothing referred by the council, so we move on to number 6. 6A1, the role of the chair. Bill H., you want to start us off?
Yeah, I watched the recording of your meeting 2 months ago. I'm sorry I couldn't be here, but I could see that. And I know this came up, and you commented that we had discussed this and characterized, I think correctly, that I think the role of the chair is a, what's the term you used?
Administrative?
No.
Parliament.
No, there's another word.
Like Mike Pence at the county electoral votes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm forgetting the word that you're looking for too.
And I would refer you to this document, City of Fitchburg's member handbook, and discuss the responsibility, the roles of officers and members, and for the chair of any commission, it lists the responsibilities, and these are all, wish I could remember this. These are all, in my mind, very administrative, or they aren't policy making or substantive things. They amount to anyway. The role is described there, and I think maybe the main point of it is that there's really no substantial responsibilities of the chair that aren't just making the wheels turn, that we don't all have. I mean, it's a commission of equals. It's a commission of everybody has pretty much equal authorities. And I don't know if you think differently, but I think it's important to make that point.
Okay, any other discussion? You've already heard from me that I thought that it is a reasonable thing for the chair to propose agenda items and with the agreement of the staff contact to put them on the agenda. So do you want to do anything about this?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, I think you
Okay.
should, but I think any of us can propose agenda items. Matter of fact, I think if somebody communicates to you, I want this on the agenda, it should go on the agenda. I don't think there's any.
All of your agenda items are on there.
Well, but not really as I propose them. And
Oh, well.
and that's a difference. I mean,
Okay.
I had some specific language. I asked for it to be provided in the background memo, and I asked for these as separate items, and it didn't turn out that way. So this is a little bit of a touchy point with me, Steve, that you didn't respond as I think you should to a request to put items on the agenda.
Okay, well, I was not clear that the language was the important thing, and we will learn to work together on this. So apologize for that.
And we have a deadline to changes and submissions. For instance, the packet, I don't want to see the packet changed after Friday when it's posted. That's the thing I'll take with me. And it's funny because my notes have 6A, I wrote as 5, or I had as 5. So I don't know somewhere if I was looking at an older agenda or what, but the things I downloaded. So I want to hard and fast that at this point, this doesn't change. If I go somewhere, I'm going to take it, I'll take a copy, and the same thing. we can, in all fairness to the chair, say that items for the agenda have to be in place, would you say, a week before the Friday that is posted, or?
Well, Dina's deadline is Thursday noon.
Okay.
So I would say if I have everything by the beginning of business, like anytime overnight on Wednesday, because I have a draft template that I slot these things into, and I send it to Tim and Dina, and they look it over and make sure that Tim will insert any council referrals. Now, that's one thing that can happen, is that council on some months will meet 2 days before us. And they could refer something to us. Okay. And in that case, you will get a revised agenda before 24 hours. Because it's typically on the consent agenda, Tim generally knows that in time for the agenda deadline, or Ross, they will be on the council agenda for referring to TTC. But as Bill and Bill both know, alders can ask for things to be referred to additional commissions and committees. And so we could get an agenda update due to the council action 2 days before. And I apologize for that, but we should.
No, that's out of our control. So
Yep.
I guess.
I have a question. Is this agenda a shared item that people can view? So if it's like so you can see in real time that changes are being made, so you would be as
Typically not. It's into a system called
Registar?
OnBase.
Okay.
Registar is used by Madison,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's
That was
similar kind of
okay, I'm
functionality.
sorry. Okay.
And it's sort of locked down.
Okay.
And then if there's some emergency, then there
Okay.
should be a
Sorry.
revised
You guys-
agenda published.
It's too bad you can't have a live something that's on.
But we're not privy to the agenda until the rest of the public is. It gets published, and that's when we know. We'll get an email notification that, hey, it's here for you, but.
Okay, I was just thinking, since you guys are all sort of in hand and contributing to it, that perhaps you would have somewhat equal access to at least view it, but that's not the case.
Not the case.
Okay,
But it sounds like
that would be a nice idea.
we should, if you have something that you want on the agenda, send it to the chair and the staff contact with, I guess, in whatever your preferred format is. And if you got a special request, I would like these 3 items broken up, just set up the other guy to win, I guess. Try to be as unambiguous as possible, and concise. And
Okay.
One last thing on that.
Yeah.
I think you're cutting yourself not enough slack when you said that if this is going Thursday, you're thinking of the day ahead. We could make it, room for life. Mm-hmm. Should we just set it down and say that by let's just say Monday end of business or Monday night?
Well, I can't sometimes make that deadline, so that's why I would give people more time. Also, you don't want to say it's got to be done way ahead of time, and then that you're really cutting off any kind of emergent issues. So,
well, I think what we're getting at here is that I want you to, as the chair, to have enough time to read it or look at it and get it in without having to stay up late. But I also understand that the committee or the council can change things.
yeah.
So that's a given that let's limit the change or screw up, whatever you want to call it, to one group and not us. And what you tell us what, and we'll follow. So when do you need the information by? Any suggestions or requests by?
So I'm retired, and I work on this during business hours on Wednesday, on Thursday morning. So if I have this in my mail on Thursday morning, I can get it to Dina.
Okay.
And if there, if there's some deviation from that because I'm not available or something, then I'll let everybody know in advance. Okay.
Okay, just, I don't want to belabor all this, but on discussion items, if somebody wants to discuss something, I assume that they would just shoot you an email and say, I'd like to discuss this at the next meeting. I think it would be helpful then, and there's not a format for that. There's not a,
Right.
you don't say where is this and where is that.
Okay.
It just, this is my idea, let's talk about it. But it would probably be a good idea to attach to the agenda the emails you get. So if you get an email from me or from Bill J., you just attach that.
Well done.
What's that?
Well done, Bill J.
I agree with that. If there is no other collateral, then that's a good thing. In this case, for example, I have these discussion items for potential policy things, so I'm providing packet material. So either you provide the packet material or your email will be the packet background.
Right.
And so, for example, your email could have links in it of discussion items or something like that. Say, I saw this great webinar and here's the recording or something like that. Okay, so please provide any packet materials or a detailed email about what you want on the agenda, and that will be included in the packet. Okay? All right. I think that the objective for this 6A2 open meetings law was just to review the fact that we cannot have more, we're a body of 7. We cannot have more than 3 people discussing the commission's business. If you have 4 of us together at some event or something like that, the clerk notices it, and they say that there will be a quorum of the Transportation Commission meeting at Fitchburg days, and no business will be discussed, you know, that kind of thing. And that way, we're all good. This is why if you want to send something to everybody, don't do that. You send it to now Ross, and he will send it out on your behalf, like my memo about these topics. I will ask him to use blind carbons for the addressees and say in the body that it's to all the members of the commission. And what that does is it prevents people from accidentally replying all. Because if you do reply to all, then we have an unnoticed electronic meeting contrary to statute and ordinance. Are there any questions about the open meetings laws?
I have some other comments.
Okay.
After listening to that discussion that was at the meeting, I got curious, and there is a Wisconsin Open Meetings Law Compliance Guide.
Yes, by the Attorney General.
The Attorney General, we can all read, and I looked at that and read some of it, and I don't, a couple things. One is I don't completely agree with you. I think that it's fully okay under the open meetings law if one of us has some information to share with the whole group, to just send it to everybody. You can attach a warning, you know, don't forward this to everybody or don't respond to everybody, that kind of thing. But to send a piece of information out to the group, I think is okay by my reading of this document. So that's one point. And a case in point that we might, as an illustrative point, we all got an email from Elizabeth Ward this week. I assume we all did, I did. And she described her views on things.
And health, yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't know if that crosses the line. I think one of the things you see if you look at this document is it's really some ambiguity of where the line is.
It was written before the electronic age.
It's good, well, it describes electronic communications. It's good to be cautious. It's good to respect the law. It's an important law. but it's also good to communicate with each other. I mean, it's also good, if I run into Rich on the street to talk about something. But I do think that we can share information, and if there's a problem with Elizabeth's communication, I think that could be a good example or a good point to bring that up. If there's not a problem with it, it's a good example of what's not a problem, because she certainly sent that to everybody without and I guess I don't see how going through city staff changes anything. Laundering it through city staff, I don't think makes a difference, but maybe it does. So those are my thoughts about that. I also wanted to mention one of the issues in the opens meeting law is the walking quorum. And this is, you talk about ambiguous and troublesome. This has bugged me from the first time I heard about it. If I talk to Rich, I think we should do X, and Rich talks to Bill J about this, and Bill J talks to Micah, that's 4 people. Mm-hmm. That's a quorum.
Even though we're not in the same place?
Even though you're not in the same place. I would highlight, Steve, when you were seeking the chairmanship, you talked to me, mm-hmm. You talked to Rich. I don't know if you talked to anybody else, but if you talked to one other person about that, you were skirting the limits of the law about walking quorum. And so and I don't have any objection to what you did, but I just point out that there's some real ambiguities in that law, in what you can do. In my mind, there are anyway.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question to Bill down? So this is just a much smaller group that doesn't meet as often. How does council handle this? Are you guys never emailing each other and together to share information? I mean, that can't be.
Yeah, so we had Valerie, the city attorney, Valerie Zisman. She gave us a talk on these very topics, and actually for the council it's a little bit worse, because in this body, I don't think there's ever a concept of a 2/3 majority needed to vote on anything. It's just simple majority. So what Steve said earlier, you could have 3 people and you'll be fine. That's not the case with council, because we could have what they call a negative quorum, which means if there's a 2/3 vote required, it only takes 3 people to shoot it down. But yeah, I mean, I talk very little with any of the other alders. And that was actually, one of my questions I had on this item. How does a body make progress outside of this 1.5 or 2 hour window every month? Because it seems like we need to do that, but the only way to do that is to work together, but you can't work with too many people together. So,
you can notice special meetings.
So I guess to answer my question, you're saying that yes, I mean, you basically are following what Steve was saying. You are not communicating. Like you're never sending an email to all members of the council to say, hey, I have this piece of information that I want to share with everyone.
This is why the members of the 3 people standing committees are never in the same district. They split there are 3 standing committees, each with 3 alders, and they try to put alders from different districts together in each of those 3 committees so that they're not showing up at the same grand opening and that kind of thing, because for that 3-person committee, it only takes 2 people to have a quorum. So that's the worst.
I've been very aware of this for the walking quorum thing since I first was on a commission back when Kim was here, and part of it I was a part-time bartender for 50 years, and a lot of people hung out there. And it could be people from the commissions, it was a couple mayors in there, or there's all kinds of stuff. Now, here, my question, I guess, is I make it a point not to talk business when I see people from here. But like with Plan Commission, Ed and I would talk about Iceland because I have family up there and he went up there. Or I might be talking about a kid in college with somebody else. Or I might be, and I enjoy getting to know the people that I sit with. So whether it's at have a beer, but the thing is I don't discuss this, but nobody knows that I'm not discussing it, I guess is where I'm getting at. So I mean, am I to hear that if I'm out to dinner and I see other people from here, I should leave? Or what, you know, I mean, let's be reasonable, you know what I mean?
Well, I think that the guide that Bill referenced takes the position that it's up to you to be able to prove that you were not talking about business. And the assumption would be that if 3 people out of 5 on a body are together, that they could be talking about business, or they might be talking about business, and it's on them to prove that they're not. And so therefore, the best thing to do is to have an expert witness like the city attorney at your party, or, you know, there's different ways to do that, but it's dicey, and you don't want,
I think Kate's volunteering.
you don't want people accusing you of things.
No, I understand. I get accused of stuff when I'm guilty, not when I'm innocent.
Okay, so just in the interest of
Kidding.
time, so if we have information like Elizabeth sent out today, according to the attorney, we are supposed to send it here, and that will then be distributed out.
That's what I suggested, and I have yet to respond to Bill about that.
Is what Elizabeth did today okay, which is send it to Tim and blind copy this group, because that's essentially just circumventing.
Yeah, so
step.
what that did was it prevented anybody from replying to all.
Yeah.
And that's an important safeguard. I agree with Bill that you can send stuff out to everybody on the body. The danger comes when someone replies to that. So one way of preventing that is to just have a standard operating procedure where things to go to committee members go to the staff contact who distributes them. Another way to do it is to always make sure you're using blind copies. Now, I did not know who else got it. I find out this evening that she sent it to everybody. But all I could see is Tim is a 2 and I'm a BCC. So my suggestion that everything go to Tim for distribution. Ross, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, Ross. Or another suggestion is that always use blind carbons or blind courtesy copies when you send it to everybody. Both of those things allow for the distribution of a one-shot thing to everybody in the committee without a response.
So Ross is just gonna blind copy everyone too, though, correct? So like either,
Correct.
whether I send a blind copy or he says blind copy, you're not gonna know who it got sent to either way.
Correct.
So, I mean, I would propose that we set a standard for the group that we just send things blind copy, because I don't want to put it on him that he has to forward all my emails.
Well,
Like,
I don't find that it's that common.
right, yeah, I'm gonna start sending this joke.
just got him
Send
here.
this joke to the group.
I find that it's not that common that you communicate with everybody, but
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Does this same policy apply to attendance? So I can't make the meeting today, just letting everyone know.
well, I think that in the guide, they make some distinction between things like I can't make the meeting,
Okay.
or I think we should fund this TIF district or something
sure.
like that.
Okay.
So, I did write to Dave Wilborn, who wrote to Dina, sent a voicemail to Dina saying that he couldn't be here tonight because he was feeling ill. I responded to him hoping he was feeling better and basically saying, write to the staff contact and the chair if you can't come.
Okay.
So you don't need to tell everybody. But the chair will need to mitigate, say, uh-oh, we're going to have trouble making quorum or something like that. Yes, I was going to agree with Bill that that is legal to send to everybody, and it's merely, my suggestion was merely a safeguard to prevent that accidental next step reply to all, because all of us have been on email chains where
You can't get up.
you can't go to every single person in the group and say, stop sending me this stuff very easily. And so by funneling it through one place. That's a way to do that. But if, Tim and Ross, do you agree that it would be fine to just BCC when you want to send everybody to the group?
Yes.
Okay, my caveat would be, when you do that, say, I am BCCing all the members of the TTC. That way, everybody knows who got it, but you can't do the accidental reply to all, which is like the reflex of a lot of people to,
What's the default like in the email?
you know. All right. We need to vote on anything on that, or we're good?
I don't want to belabor this either, but this is a long document with a lot of qualifications, and I think if you look at it, you will be reassured about the risks involved. I think we can do a lot more legally than the process you're describing, but I guess that's the safe route. And I just mentioned that in here, the term meeting is defined. What we're talking about is noticing public meetings. It says the term does not include any social or chance gathering or conference which is not intended to avoid this subject. So this is not about when you run into somebody in the street or whatever.
The beer tent at Festa Italia.
The problem arises, if you're the bartender and you talk to Bill and then you talk to Micah and then you raise this, it becomes ambiguous when you've created a meeting, a walking quorum in that fashion. But I would say if you read through this, I think you'll be a little bit reassured that, it's not, we don't have to be totally compulsive and neurotic about every conversation we have about transportation. That's all.
Is that 2019? Yeah.
All right. The ethics law is a set of ordinances that simply tells us that you can't accept favors for your vote on the commission. And we have a state statute that says that we as members of a transit commission cannot hold any stock in any transportation company. And you'll recall from your application for a mayoral appointment that's on there. The other thing is, buy your own beer, that kind of thing. It's just something, I recommend that everybody read it. Of substantial value. We were told might have been inflated, but when I got the training many years ago, it was $1. So that means
It's only $5.
it's $5 now. So you get a beer during happy hour, but not
Say
after.
they can't get beer for $5 anymore.
Well, it depends on what kind of beer.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not going to say any more about that. Does anybody else have anything? Okay, moving on. The next item that I put on the agenda was the fact that historically, I was on this commission for 10 years, and it never reviewed new development projects. And I don't think that this is a change in the ordinance. The ordinance says that we shall review all new development projects, as quoted here. So that has not been happening, and I think it's important, and I would like to see it happen, and it will be up to the city administrator who puts together, and the various department heads who put together cover sheets for resolutions and ordinances and development plans and so on, to put Transportation Commission on it. But I think that because it's very clear that this is our responsibility to comment and make recommendations to council on these things, that we should expect those to come to us in the future. And Bill Jetzer pointed out that at the moment, council is considering a development plan for the north part of the Blaney Hartung area in the southeast quadrant of Fish Hatchery and South Said Road. And it's got a transportation component. There's a neighborhood plan for that area that has a commuter rail station area reserved. It is adjacent to two of our smart code areas. And so we probably should be looking at that. So does anybody want to have any other discussion about that?
I agree with you.
So do I. Who do we expect to provide us the information?
The
Not
council,
being that I'm on the plan commission,
Yep.
but plan commission is Tuesday or Thursday, so it hasn't happened yet.
yep.
So, but I've always wondered why they have a plan commission person here when there's never any two-way communication. So I'm
Indeed.
liking what I'm hearing. But back to my question, to what extent and who's responsible?
Well, again, staff should be putting these things on the agendas. So that means that Chad Brecklin on a Tuesday morning meeting has to remind department heads that when development proposals come through, they need to be referred to Plan Commission. It would mostly be Public Works and Planning Department, but also Parks Department. I can tell you the historical reason that it hasn't happened is that back when the Transportation Commission was started in 2005, the thought was that developers had to pay high cost per hour engineers and planners to come to a lot of meetings. And what this did was it obligated them to send their representatives to another meeting. And the bicycle committee is facing the same thing, is that council's reluctant, or at least was at that time reluctant, to send things to a bicycle committee because then these engineers would have to get their 175 or 350 or whatever they charge per hour to come and take the comments of the committee and defend the proposal and so on. I always felt personally that that was overblown and that that was not necessary that they send, I mean, one representative maybe, but you don't have to bring a great big team. We're going to give comments, and those comments are going to go to plan and then council, and they will have an opportunity to address them then. Bill?
I agree with you. I'm a little worried about an avalanche of information and plan details that I don't want to have to think about. But so I don't know when you cross the line and all of a sudden you're underwater sort of with stuff to read. So I'm a little concerned about that. I wondered if an approach to this to get this formalized in the city would be to have maybe Bill J. introduce a resolution to the council or something like that, so they can actually act.
Get their attention, yeah.
Not just get their attention. I mean, you could go and speak to the council. Bill could speak, but some kind of resolution that says, is that a way to kind of sort of formalize the intent and make the point?
It would put the council on notice that they should change the establishing ordinance for the commission if they didn't want that to happen, certainly. I would be open to that. Other thoughts?
Another way would be for you to speak to the council about this and say that the Transportation Transit Commission has met, discussed this, and expects to be engaged in all development.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that we could do to avoid the avalanche is to talk about what kinds of things constitute the kind of development plans that we should see. So, for example, a plat would be important, but maybe not a CSM where you're only dividing a couple of lots. Obviously, architectural and design review might, should we be commenting on the circulation within a big site? Yes. Should we be talking about the circulation within a single-family CSM? No. So it might be worth having a discussion with the planning director about what kinds of things actually would be useful to hear us weigh in on.
Right.
I support what Bill H. was saying, in that some of our plan commission packets have exceeded or approached 800 pages.
Yes,
And one page can be this big.
that's right.
So, and that's where I was partly getting at, was what are we expecting? Because the ADRs, see, the surveys, we don't care about existing conditions, we care about what's the plan. The ADRs, the architectural design reviews, we really shouldn't have a say in criticizing, well, somebody calls art or something like that. But I would like to see more about how this affects us, and maybe we should put it back to Steve for you to come up with what we really want. And so that we're not inundated with a lot of documents that mean that you don't read the rest of the packet. I don't know, you'd be okay with that?
I'm thinking right now that because we get our packets electronically, it may be a reasonable thing to do to get the whole packet for a big project and highlight as we go through and say, these are the sheets that we're going to discuss, you know, the site plan, the traffic study, or whatever it is.
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking, is for you to determine ahead of time what it is that we need, and that would be a site plan.
Yep.
That would be any traffic, that might be road sections, that might be miscellaneous, but again, it has really nothing to do with the inside of a building.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with you know, the finish of a building or anything like that.
How about if I subcommittee this with Tim and Ross?
Good.
And you guys help me with this, and we'll try to figure out what's coming through. We'll meet with Deanna and try to come up with some working guidelines.
Yeah, Deanna's on Zoom right now, but we can sit separately, privately, and kind of discuss that.
Yep.
Kind of what Deanna and I talked about was, you know, one, exactly what you guys said, kind of define what new developments you want to see. You know, you probably don't want to see a conditional use on a restaurant. So I think that's the first step, and then the second step is, once you define that, what are you exactly looking at?
Sure.
You know, so I think sitting down, Ross, myself, you, and Deanna, we can maybe define that and then propose something to council, and if they agree to that, then that's good. Or if they, like you mentioned earlier, maybe they want to remove it or not. I don't know. So
Shall we bring our proposal back to this group first?
I think so.
And then if all of you think that we are on the right track, then we can toss it upstairs and see what they say.
Run it up the chain.
Why don't I'm going to kick myself for volunteering later. But I haven't even seen the packet for the plan commission, but why don't I just take a look and take out some sample sheets from it and bring that to our next meeting, if we want to review that.
Well, we'll have access to the plan packet too.
Okay.
And I think that you might have some valuable insight since you know what gets talked about on each of these things. Do you want us to include you in that discussion? Okay. All right. We will definitely.
We want you to do the work.
I got the whole family coming in a week.
All right. The next thing is bills. And did I mess up the wording of this?
No, this is fine. This is a reference to, as you all know, we've talked at length for a long time about the problems of getting people to this Fitchburg Civic Campus. And part of that is getting people to the senior center. That's sort of where I got involved, but also this little glitch we have in our in the bus system, where you can't take a bus to City Hall unless you practically go through downtown Madison. So the need to connect Hatchery Hill to here somehow. So anyway, we ask, there is a resolution, a council resolution to have a transit study, and it's funded, or at least there was money earmarked for that. I think we need to catch up. Where is that? What's going to happen? When is it going to happen? Will it be adequate? How do we want to follow up? Because I really want this issue to be at the top of our list, to stay at the top of our list until it's resolved. And, Steve, you got a lot of great ideas, interesting stuff to talk about, but I don't want to see this lost, and I want to follow up. So I don't know, Bill, if that's something you can get after, what's going on, or what you guys
I can take this as a to-do, figure out the status of this.
Oh, we can provide a status right now. So,
You know what, why don't you go ahead and provide a status?
Let's hear from staff.
so as you know, we've been short-staffed. So just on Monday, Ross has moved into that role. So this has kind of been put on hold. So kind of what Ross and I have talked about, one of his first tasks would be just to kind of read up on what's been done to date and then kind of come up with a schedule. We've had some preliminary talks with Madison Metro. We also talked with the community center too on what they're looking for and
Senior Center?
Senior center, sorry. So like I mentioned, I think just kind of researching what we've done and kind of creating a path forward and a schedule to that. So, maybe Ross, by the next meeting, we can keep this as I think would be good to always have this as an agenda item and maybe just provide an update on what's transpired the last month. So, next month we can kind of provide you guys an update on, hey, we performed the research, we spoke to X, Y, and Z, and here's kind of a proposed schedule on what we anticipate.
Okay, and if I could just, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I just want to say there are really two things to track. One is there's a CIP item to buy a vehicle.
Yes.
You're just in the process of doing the CIP again. I don't know if that's still in there, what year it's in there for.
It is in there, and it, I believe got pushed to 2025.
Okay.
Due to this study being.
That gives it a little time. We don't want to buy a vehicle if that's not the
No.
solution we want.
So we pushed that a year just because no work has been done on the transit study.
Right. Great. So so we'll learn more from the study. I think the study was funded for either 15 or 25,000. 15.
Yep. I read the
That's not much money to do a respectable study.
I thought the initial fund was 15.
I thought it got bumped to 25.
Yeah, it was bumped up. They took money from the fact that there was the open position, right? Like they
Yes.
over the salary from the open position.
Yeah, I believe we have 25,000 to work with.
And then my question was also, I thought also that we were looking into, there is a like DOT grant program or something.
Yes.
It's like the Transportation Alternatives Program, and I thought we were looking, that does like matching funds, so I thought that we were looking into that as well.
Yep, that's how we paid for the B cycles. So just to bring people who are newer, which includes you three for sure, up to speed, for many years when I was on the council and then even as mayor, I served on what was called the Contracted Services Oversight Subcommittee. That was a committee, a Madison committee, subcommittee of their transit committee. And it had a representative from all the different entities that bought Metro service. So that was MATC, Madison School District, Middleton, Fitchburg, Town of Madison. And so the contract that we're working under is one that I worked on drafting and so on. So I do have a lot of experience with that and be eager to bring you up to date on what some of those other solutions have been considered in the past and so on. So because this has been a chronic problem and I failed when I was mayor to provide a solution to it. Okay, so we will have that as a standing agenda item or work item, similar to the ones that we might pick from this list of 20 here.
Okay, and don't have to do right now, but sometime maybe for me at least. What is the timetable? For the city budget, I mean, I don't know where this money, this 25,000 was in, I don't know, is it the current year's budget? Is it still there? Is it going to go away? And when is the next?
Is it in the CIP?
No, the 25,000.
25 is not in the CIP, so if it was in last year's budget, we rolled it. If it's in this year's budget, it's still there, and if it doesn't get expensed this year, we roll it into 2024. So yeah, that's something on our radar that we won't lose. We'll just roll whatever we haven't expensed.
Very good. Any other points on that item? Okay, moving along to the next one. There were, so the Beltline PEL, that stands for Program and Environmental Linkages. Planning and Environmental Linkages. And so I was on that study back when I was in public service, and they're trying to finalize it now. It's a plan of what the Beltline will look like in the 2040s.
And I think they're using 2050 as their endpoint now.
Okay, that makes sense because we worked on it like 8 years ago.
2015 is the first year. That's the year.
So, City of Madison was very concerned about the divisions caused in the local road network and in neighborhoods caused by the Beltline, and have made a lot of requests for connections over or under the Beltline in the local road network. The DOT, of course, is interested in adding capacity, and there is a strong counter argument for that among people who believe in the science of induced traffic. And so they want to know what the city of Fitchburg's position is on the PEL, Beltline PEL study. And this would be the obvious body to make a recommendation to the council. But I think we are kind of late with this, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, we've had a couple of meetings. Tim and I attended one on May 18th that was for the various city staff from surrounding areas. And
It was a technical advisory committee.
Okay.
And then June 7th, there was a public meeting at the Boys and Girls Club in Fitchburg. That was for the public. Went over basically the same stuff, just in a little bit less detail.
Yeah, and then there was another meeting on the 8th at another place, but.
It was on the 6th.
Oh, 6th.
Same difference,
Okay.
yeah.
So since you're plugged into that process, Ross, do you have thoughts on how we should proceed? Should we read it? Should we read the executive summary? Should we discuss it next month? Is that too late? Should we have a special meeting?
I don't think next month would be too late. I mean, they're still taking comments and trying to finalize the way that they're going to move forward. I think the useful things for Fitchburg in particular, they have several dozen, I'll call them action items, various projects that may or may not be included in their final proposal. And there's various ones within the city limits of Fitchburg or just north or in other directions of the Fitchburg border that affect us more than others. So I think reading through those particular ones would be useful. There's a lot of bike and pedestrian connections that are being proposed, as well as street connections, like you said, latitude 43. It's near latitude 43. It's connecting to the Innovation Campus. Yes, that's the one.
So yeah, that's a connection. One of the concepts I came up with in the years I was well, everyone knows that Madison has a south belt line. Fitchburg also has a north belt line, which is formed by the belt line and Route 14 and the Verona Road. And it has a similar isolating effect. And ask anybody in the Jamestown neighborhood how isolated they feel. And how difficult it is to get across walking and biking and so on. So I have been pushing for many years the reconnection of Perry Street across the belt line to connect the Stewart Street to the Park Street corridor. And that's all in Madison, but it like crazy benefits Fitchburg because it's another way north. Likewise, this connection proposed between Rolfsmeyer Road and Southdale, the reconnection of Badger Road, east and west Badger Roads across the belt line. But another example is that they're proposing a new connection across the belt line between Whitney Way and Gammon, because that's basically too big a gap to not be able to get across. And these additional connections would be so important in getting local traffic off the belt line. And I proposed early in the process and kept asking about it, wouldn't it be better to just demolish the belt line and make a surface-connected boulevard and could reconnect it to the local road network? Because during rush hour, you only move at 25 miles an hour anyway, and the rest of the time, the benefit of having a better connected network would far outweigh the fact that you couldn't go 55. And needless to say, nobody else liked that idea. I mean, some people liked it, but nobody who had anything to say in the final plan. So
think big, Steve, I'll give you that.
yeah. Well, I always say that no one will be able to tell us whether we're going to be right or wrong. But 100 years from now, they will have dug up the belt line and there'll be electric trains running into Military Ridge. That's my prediction. So how do you want to proceed? I mean, we're not going to be able to read that study in a packet and come up with a recommendation for council at our next meeting. So do we need a special meeting? Do you need to send it out in advance?
Why don't we
do you need to curate the parts that you want us to read?
Why don't we check to see when comments are due and kind of get a handle on that, and then we can recommend whether it's a special meeting or if it's still 2 months out, maybe.
Yep, or homework.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So
All right, so
let's
that will
look
be,
into that.
staff will do that. Does
And
that
then
seem like a good way forward for everyone?
We'll get an email out with everyone BCC.
I looked through the packet twice looking for this information on this item, and then I went to the agenda and looked for supporting documents, and I searched for PEL, and all I got was Elizabeth's last name, I think. You know, so I would like to get some more information on what we actually have.
Yeah.
They do have, if you go on WISDOT's website or just Google Beltline
Yeah,
PEL,
that's what I ended up doing.
they have
There's a
handouts
project page
stuff.
and full of links.
Exactly.
All right, so we have a plan forward for that. So the next item, and you know, one thing we didn't talk about, and I am not familiar, so I asked Bill, does this group over the past few years try to get done at a set time, or did they work through their agenda and devil take the hindmost?
Our meetings have been very short.
Okay.
And, you know, we're entering the Steve Arnold era of Transportation Transit Commission. So I don't think past history is going to be a good comparison. We've never been late at that.
All right. So what is the sense of members, whether we want to try to get done at a set time and defer things, or do we want to push ahead and get through whatever is on our palette for a particular night?
I would favor a time limit. I mean, everybody's got other things to do when they can't sleep. And,
Yeah, but then you're kicking down the road.
yeah.
One thing that the Resource Conservation Committee has done in just recently is that they've gone through their agenda and they have time boxed each and every item on it, where in the past, they might have gone for 3 hours, and now every meeting is a set
I
time.
remember when that was introduced. I think that that's a good aspiration, but I don't want to start that yet until we get more of a sense of what our agendas are going to be looking like.
Everybody have caffeine right before you arrive, so you talk faster, think faster.
All right, well, we have at least, I would say, until 8:30 to discuss these things and get a few reports. So does that seem like a good goal for tonight, for 8:30?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So I tried to pull together, no one else submitted, other people submitted some ideas, but nobody else submitted any collateral information. So I tried to put together an average of 2 pages on each topic and hope that what I put there was you found useful and representative and not too slanted or anything. And my thought for a process was to agree to multi-vote or ranked choice vote on one of these or perhaps some other topics we think should be on our work plan for the year. And I was going to offer that we could vote at the end of this meeting or at the beginning of the next meeting, but with 2 members missing, I think we should do it at the next meeting. But does that seem like a reasonable way to proceed?
Now, we would rank these as to the order in which we take them up, or?
Your number one thing is the thing that you think would be most beneficial to the city and the residents if we had a newer or better or different policy about that thing. So these are policy things that would be meant to affect everything going forward as opposed to project decisions on whether to reconnect Berry Street or something like that.
If I could just,
Yes.
I got to get this much off my chest. Does not, Steve, I've known you for a long time. It does not surprise me that you have 20 topics to discuss. And I applaud you, and you probably know more about transportation in Fitchburg and urban transportation than anybody in the city. And you've been deeply involved so much. So I appreciate all that. This is a huge list of topics.
We don't have to discuss them all, to be clear. If everybody, if people just say, I want to talk about some number 8, I don't even know what that is. And we could have 5 minutes on it or something like that. I feel like we should not agree to work on something without having a discussion and bring everybody up to some kind of common understanding of what we're talking about with those 3 or 4 words each.
And Bill H., if it makes you feel any better, this could be distilled down to maybe like 5 or 6 things if you lump almost all of these things under Vision Zero, right? I mean, truck routes, age-friendly public transit, safe routes to school, slip lanes, speed limit reduction, all of that could be pigeonholed as part of an overall Vision Zero effort.
That was going to be kind of one of my comments too. It's like if we're going to rank, or not rank them 1 to 20, but like pick out our top ones. I feel like there's maybe 5 or 6 things in here that are like, adopt this plan that someone else has put together that has vague goals that you want to meet. And I feel like if you can kind of lump all of those in together and say, do we want to adopt some sort of overarching plan that someone else has created? And if we do choose to do that, then we could maybe dig deeper and say, like, which one of those do we want to adopt? But yeah.
By way of introduction, I would say that some of these are quite narrow and a lot of them overlap. And so it could be that we want to tackle something that's not so overarching to get a success. It could be that it would organize our thinking better if we had some big overarching vision and then sort of did a Pareto analysis of what is the 20% that's going to get us the 80% of benefit. So I didn't want to presume one of those two paths was the right one. If we could discuss that first rather than discuss individual policies, would it be better to have some big crazy thing? Now, we do have the comprehensive plan, and I wrote down comprehensive plan, and I think that was Bill J's suggestion, comprehensive plan, objectives and policies. That turns out to be about 6 pages of the comp plan, and the themes was only 2 pages. So I gave you the themes and not the goals, objectives, and policies.
So even some of the goals, objectives, and policies definitely would fit in some of the other items.
Right. Yep. So that is, you could say, oh, we're just going to focus on the comprehensive plan and pick one of those things there. And that would be another strategy. So, you said?
I mean, yeah, I like the coming up with as a group, which I don't think we have to pick something from the comprehensive plan. I think if we're gonna decide what we think would be best for the city, then we should decide what we think would be best for the city.
This is a true brainstorm list. Some of these ideas could be crap. Bill?
Just to contrarian with what Mike had just said, we have a comprehensive plan. A lot of thought went into putting it together. Some time, people invested a lot in creating it. So, that is the statement of what we should be doing as far as transportation. I just, a little, part of me wants to say, let's just look at the comprehensive plan. That's our direction. That in fact is the city council's direction to us about what we're about. And to approach it with that point of view. So I'm a little bit, for that reason, I have a little bit of misgivings about launching off in other directions, especially if they're not consistent with the comprehensive plan. So that's just a thought. Why have a plan if we're not going to respect it?
Right. Some of these are much more detailed than would appear in a comprehensive plan.
I have this adopted March 10th, 2020. I think it's a good idea with any plan to review and look for progress and look for shortcomings.
March 10th, 2020.
Is when the
was the last update?
Nothing happened around then to change anything.
yeah, well, that's 3 years. But I think that any document that is used going forward should be reviewed to see, does it still apply, and what have we missed and what have we done well with. And then this doesn't mean changing it, but maybe every few years take a look at this and say that, is this working? If not, let's at least have a plan to go forward.
Well, maybe that should be a approach to do a review of the comprehensive plan. Holding these things in mind as topics and issues related to it, but review the plan and highlight these are the things that have not been done and that have and that should be done. Take that approach.
And a second note, NACTO. Do we need to have a discussion about that, or is that something we can just do?
It costs money, so there needs to be a little thought to it. As you guys are probably aware, it's the National Association of City Transportation Officials, and they have been historically very progressive in their resistance to using highway standards for city streets, which is kind of the default. And so they're kind of the experts on bike and ped infrastructure. It's a bunch of large cities. Milwaukee's a member. You can be an associate member if you're not big enough. But they basically have staff and they do their own design guides and things like that. And Federal Highways, which also does some of these things, is kind of a few years behind. Do you feel like I'm characterizing them correctly?
Yes.
Are we talking a lot of money, or is this something we just
I
say?
think it's $10,000 a year or something like that.
For an associate member, yes.
So we are going through the budget process, starting that is something this commission wants us to.
I think I would put that on you guys' shoulders. Is that something that we would benefit from? Do you, or is it
It's kind of
something
like, what's the direction you want to go? If you feel like they are, it's kind of it's a set of policy preferences that they have compared to the fast and wide crowd that dictates the state and federal highway systems. And so it's kind of a policy statement when you join NATCO, as they say, I want to be people-oriented, I want complete streets, I don't want anybody to die.
No, I saw their website and it was rather broad in a lot of the stuff that I was looking at.
I have some suggestions, just from, well, if you're gonna pick some of these out on here, and also looking at some of the previous agenda items that you've brought up of things that are important. Age-friendly public transportation, if you're interested in with the seniors, so that would go hand in hand with that. I always think community engagement is always welcome, especially when you're making transit or transportation changes. The park and ride areas, that was also something about the study that was transit-oriented development zoning overlay. When you talked about the plan commission bringing their plans to the TTC, that would marry in well with that.
That was suggested by our planning director, by the way.
Potentially walk-friendly community, depending on when people have to go for transit or what have you, make sure if they have to go walk further because the routes have changed, that they have a walk-friendly or something that's more conducive to that. But those are things that you could focus on that would also accomplish or tie in with some of the other things that you are finding that are important or that you want to become more important again. And then, I don't know. So, I mean, you could kind of kill two birds with one stone, I guess, so to speak.
Very good.
Do we want to then go over this, I'm sorry, do we want to go over this next month or?
Bill, go ahead.
I do. I wanted to make a motion,
Let's hear
which
your
is that our next step is to review the City of Fitchburg Comprehensive Plan, Transit Plan. No, that's a different thing. Yeah, the comprehensive plan. With consideration of these multiple topics, and arrive at an assessment of the plan. Is it adequate? Is it inadequate? Does it need additions? Does it need deletions or whatever? But I think it would be appropriate as a first step to review the plan. I mean, that is the city's transit plan, and go from there. And then dig into which ones of these things are important to.
I would ask a question of clarification. I'm sure you meant the transportation element of the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
But there is also a transit plan.
Right.
And so.
No, I meant the transportation element of the.
Okay, very good.
Plan.
Second, before we discuss?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, you want to make any further cases about that, Bill?
No, I just.
Who else would like to weigh in on that thought?
I'm not opposed to that. I think though
No, this one.
that I can take any of these 20 items and fit them into something that's in the comprehensive plan transportation section pretty easily. And so like I'm not opposed to doing that or like picking things from the comprehensive plan. I just think that it is, especially if I'm looking at, the themes and not the like specific goals and objectives, I can put any of those 20 things in one of those themes.
I agree with you, Micah. I did not read the entire chapter because there's a lot of existing conditions and things like that I don't need to read that plan to know. Well, we can certainly say that the transit system in the plan is completely out the window compared to the new one. But I did review the the themes and the goals, objectives, and policies, and do agree that if you want to achieve one of those goals, like have a balanced transportation system, then you immediately have to pick things like these 20 to start working on that. So, but it's a good framework for our thinking, and so we have a second. So that would be a reasonable thing to do, is everybody review the transportation element. It's on the web under the planning department. Then you have just a short blurb on each of these things, and you could bring more things that seem to be necessary to achieve those goals in the plan to us next month, and we can try to pick some things that we're actually going to work on. Any more discussion?
I have a question. And this is personal. I walk not even my dog, our daughter's dog, every night, 50 to 70 minutes. And I go into Madison, and I'm always reminded of a Shel Silverstein book saying where the sidewalk is. Because I'm on sidewalks until I'm on sidewalks until I get to Fitchburg, and then I'm walking in the street.
Yep.
So, and that was part of number 19. But I'm asking, do you know the history of why? Is that just in my neighborhood, or is that all through Fitchburg that they didn't like sidewalks?
So Bill and I are experts on the sidewalk wars of the early 2000 teens. We can go into that, but we are very unique in having an ordinance that specifies that sidewalks shall not be installed in a number of mapped neighborhoods unless there's a referendum of those neighbors. And that was in reaction to a very reasonable thing, our first bike and ped plan. This is worth talking about quickly. Anna Bijak, who was Ross's predecessor, was very conscientious and smart. He said, okay, we got this bike and ped plan. It says we should have priority sidewalk projects where people really need to walk and there's no safe place to do it. And so she took a bunch of destinations like parks and commercial strips and schools, and she took quarter-mile radius around each of them, except the schools, where she took the busing radius, which is different for Madison and Verona schools. And she elucidated every street segment there in a big sheet, and there were 147 of them. And she collected all this data on fronting land use, width, vehicles traveled, site distance, posted speed, actual speed, all this stuff, and she used some very smart engineering, and she scored them, and she ranked these sidewalk segments 1 to 147 in what are the most important things that we should do. And the number one was connecting the sidewalks at East Sherrill and Parkway and Fish Hatchery to McKee Farms Park along Sherrill Drive. And you would have thought that we were proposing to dispose of nuclear waste at McKee Farms Park. And so that was a very bad thing. And there were some alders that said, I'm going to stand up for my constituents. And it was 8 lots that would have had that continuous sidewalk go through, plus all along Tower Hill Park and McKee Farms Park. So that was that year. And the following year, it said, let's connect the sidewalks that are around the PDQ on Williamsburg Way, which is now gone, but Picasso's Pizza and places like that. Let's have a sidewalk along the north side of Williamsburg Way to connect to Whitney Way, because people are walking in the street and it's busy and it's just a short stretch. And you would have thought that they were going to put nuclear waste in Western Hills Park. And we had people come in and say, I can't remove the snow, I'm disabled, I'll have to move out. And it was awful. And around this time, Anna, who is like trying to give options to the council that's based on good engineering, says, like, this is easy to figure out. They don't want me to do this, even though it was in the bike and ped plan. So that was the end of it until they rebuilt Lacey Road here. And then all of these old scabs were ripped off, and there was bleeding everywhere. And the 8 lots between the community center and Fahey Glen, where there's a roundabout now, they didn't want sidewalks, and they didn't want them on the other side either. There were 4 lots there, and that's when this ordinance came into play. That was like 2017, I think.
Is it really an ordinance, not just a policy statement or a
It's an
resolution?
ordinance. You know,
Is it, because now we have, so in transportation, that there is a policy statement. Sidewalk shall be added to.
okay, it's a resolution, not
All
an
new
ordinance.
developments and considered on streets without sidewalks when major reconstruction occurs.
Yeah.
So, in accordance with the bike and
But
pedestrian plan.
But the bike and ped plan contains
Well,
these
that was what
exemptions
you're talking
with
about,
these
yeah.
9 or 11 neighborhoods or whatever it is. It was basically all the neighborhoods that were already developed that didn't have sidewalks, plus the stretch of Lacey Road.
It's just funny because this isn't like my neighborhood where it's house after house after house. And
Yeah, I know the big lots and huge frontages. And the city changed the assessment policy so they would pay 100% for all the sidewalks
There was.
that were defined by the bike and ped plan, so, but they will still have to pay for new driveway aprons. But for Lacey Road, they said that we'll cover the driveway aprons too, change the assessment policy again. And I was trying to get a snow plowing utility that would plow the sidewalks, because I felt that that's what it boiled down to. People were complaining about plantings and privacy and noise and other things that people complain about. But I felt like the bottom line was when you took away all the cost, they still had to plow the snow. And that was the thing that they wouldn't abide by.
But I think we still can put in a sidewalk if the neighbors.
If they
go along
agree,
with it,
yes.
And it's for reasons of safety, you can still put in a sidewalk.
So you think it's gonna come up again when Lacey down there gets.
I don't know
Are
what
they
the
putting
schedule
in the
is.
sidewalks
It's
on
not-
those 3
not
houses
too
on
far away.
Sain? 2
Yeah.
houses on Sain?
I don't know about that either.
Because they complained about that.
They didn't want them.
And they,
But I don't-
I don't think they won though. I thought they had supposedly thought there was some grandfathered agreement that
Yeah.
as long as those 2 houses said they didn't want them, that their wishes would be
I suggested,
heeded. And I don't think that's, I don't know if it happened. I never heard the resolution.
I suggested to the Public Works Department at that time that they said, here's what we're going to do. If we can run it continuous with that other sidewalk and get an easement through your front yard so it's a straight sidewalk, we will plow it. Because they're already plowing the sidewalk adjacent with the park, and so you don't have to plow.
Right.
If, however, you won't give us the land or an easement, and we have to put it in the right-of-way, then you have to plow. But the sidewalks are going to be there. That was my proposal to the city to offer to those people. I don't know how it came out.
Because I know
It
it was
looks to
brought
me
up.
like they're skirting around those yards and like they didn't give the extra land, but I can't
know
tell.
it was brought up on when I was on the
Yep.
sign project
Yep.
as a resident.
So can I ask about the items here, the 20
Yeah.
things?
Before you do,
Yeah.
may I just suggest that we take the rest of another 20 minutes to discuss such things as people want to discuss on this list of items? Does that seem like a good way forward? Yeah.
Yeah.
Kick it off.
So that was gonna be my question was, so we had talked about reviewing the plan and coming back next week. What are we actually coming back to next week? Are we coming back to this list and anything that we decide to add?
Anything that you want to add?
Yeah, okay.
Do you mean next month?
next month, sorry, yeah.
We're having a special meeting
Yeah, next week.
every week, every Thursday.
I won't be here next week, so I'll schedule the meeting for you guys.
I won't be here either.
So, okay, all right.
Okay. Does anybody want clarification or to advocate or for or against any of these items?
I didn't read through all this material, I confess. Rail transit, is this about having a railroad train go from here to Chicago?
No. This is about having a railroad train go from Oregon to downtown Madison.
But that's the old, the right of way.
Transport 2020.
That, my dream is to have get on a train down here at the end of Lacey and go to Chicago.
Yeah, that'll never happen. But if two things, so you might have all heard that Metra is going to come to Rockford. So you won't have to go to Harvard anymore, so it'll be a little closer. But my dream is that you'll be able to get on down here at one of our stations and go into Madison and then get the train to Chicago.
Different train, a new train.
Different train, it'll be a commuter train to Madison, then an intercity train to Chicago, because you can't go very far if you stop at every town. So you have metro trains that feed the center, and then you have intercity trains that connect the centers.
Just curious.
But, so my idea here was that, and I showed a map of the Transport 2020 plan, and the railroad exists, and Fitchburg and Oregon worked very hard to preserve it, and it's now being used for freight, and we have 3 neighborhood plans that have transit stations in them, one in Southdale, one in Uptown, and one in the North Magaw neighborhood. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen anytime soon. I always say to get commuter rail into Madison, Fitchburg is going to need a new legislature, a new governor, and regional transit authorities, and we only have one of those right now. So,
Well, you know, the Regional Transit Authority was in the budget until the current legislature removed it. So all we would really need is a new legislature.
that's true. That's true.
Roundabouts solution.
Well, and, yeah, I mean, with fair maps, it might be,
September, October, who knows?
just a couple things on the rail transit. You mentioned that, in Illinois, there's currently service from Chicago over to Elgin, and they're going to extend that over to Rockford, and then the next plan is to go west further over to Dubuque, Iowa. In Minnesota, they're going to run between the Twin Cities and Duluth, and Madison is planning on where they're going to put their Amtrak station. So, I mean, now is a good time to be talking about this, even if it's not going to, realistically materialize. But, I mean, and maybe you know quite a bit more on this than anyone else here, but I mean, if we had service from Madison to Fitchburg to Oregon to Evansville to Janesville, it could go to Rockford and over to Chicago from there.
Indeed, so that is certainly one thing. But again, I would not expect the Madison to Janesville to Chicago route to stop in Fitchburg. But if there were passenger rail tracks, that it would be very easy to have commuter rail from Oregon and Fitchburg into Madison. And one of the great things about the BRT system is that the BRT system is complementary to Transport 2020 rail system. The north corridors are separate, the west corridors are separate, the south corridors are separate from each other, and the east corridors are separate. They all are complementary, and having a BRT system doesn't preclude having the rail later. And so far, none of the tracks have been torn up. So,
And it's also worth reiterating what you said earlier. I mean, we have been building along this rail line.
transit-oriented development.
Well, which doesn't necessarily mean rail transit, but
No, it means high-quality transit.
yes. But I mean, the fact remains, we've got Uptown, we've got Nine Springs, we've got North Park, the Limerick, and Hartung Fields going in, and we're purposely building these things along the rail line with having passenger rail as the ultimate goal. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be developing this way, because we're kind of stranding people out there right now. There's an item in the comprehensive plan that says that everybody needs to be within a quarter mile of transit in every new development. That's certainly not happening, at North Park and the Limerick and Hartson Fields, unless we're gonna count, the 5 B cycles or whatever we've got at the Limerick now.
Yep. Other discussion items?
Can someone define transit-oriented development zoning overlay?
Yes, that was suggested by Deanna, the planning director. Madison has such a thing. What it does is it raises height and density limits and lowers or eliminates parking minimums and may introduce parking maximums in order to foster high-density, high-value development that's served by high-quality transit, where high-quality transit is either rail or BRT. And so Madison is putting these overlays. So an overlay is additional regulations on an existing zoning district. And they are planning to put it along the BRT line to encourage higher value development. One of the great things that Brightline did with their rail in Florida is that they owned the real estate, and so they built this rail line, and they made boatloads of money with high-density development along the rail line. And one of the great things that you can do, if you can manage it, is to capture that extra value and use it to support transportation. But they were able to do it as a private company because they own the rails and the real estate. Anyway, we currently have transit-oriented development and traditional neighborhood development in our SMART code. And what Dina is saying is that if we use that as a model, we could allow, for example, along Fish Hatchery Road where the BRT will run, higher density development, or even require it. So that would mean, you'd rip up Fitchburg Ridge and make Johnson Street there. So that's what they mean by that.
Does that include something like, so one of my controversies is the kind of distribution of types of development that happen, so that, if I'm going to bike somewhere, I can bike to Hilldale and I can stop at Hilldale and everything's there, or I can bike to downtown Verona and I can stop in downtown Verona. Right now I can bike and drop my kid off at Achieve Gymnastics over there, and I can then bike another mile to Noble Night Games, and I can bike another mile to a restaurant, or I can bike another mile somewhere else, whereas and in between there is a bunch of office buildings and whatever anyone, I guess, has decided to build on that open space over time. Mm-hmm. Is there any, I guess, word for what I'm talking about?
Mixed-use development?
Yeah, I feel like there is no destination in Fitchburg to
no core
to go to. There is no core. There's no destination, and if you're going to value transit and not cars, it helps to group things that people want to go to into some sort of core.
I hope staff will correct me if I get over my skis here, but I think the usual thinking is that you can't build, to use an old proposed development, an archipelago village, and then expect transit to be built to serve it. Usually you have to plan the transit, and when you do, the real estate values will go up, there'll be redevelopment, and that's when you'll get those things. The beautiful mixed-use areas of Willie Street and Monroe Street and Old University and so on were all streetcar suburbs where in the 20s and 30s and so on, they had streetcars running down there. People would commute home from their downtown jobs, and their florist and their bakery and their hardware store and everything would be along those commercial strips, which would support the surrounding development. We call that traditional urbanism or old urbanism. It's hard to build that now because people feel like they can drive anywhere and park for free, and then they go for cheap land, and so you get Costco and Liberty Business Park. So investing in transit is a way to get that center of gravity to be stronger. Agreed or agreed? Other discussion items, things that people never heard of before, anything like that? If no one else has one, I will speak quickly to number 2. We applied over the last year, January actually, to be a bicycle-friendly community again, and we were renewed at the silver level for 4 more years. It was very disappointing. It was due to the fact that they made the categories a lot harder to achieve. Of 45 people that applied in the same cycle, there was 1 new bronze and like 5 bronze that went to silver. Nobody at gold or platinum got a higher classification because they were so much harder. So in analyzing this, we are going to have to do some significant things if we want to be a gold bicycle-friendly community. Things like investing in protected bike lanes or more side paths, investing in more B-cycle stations, having more policies that promote biking. And so it's going to be a heavier lift than we thought. And so that's what that discussion is about, is, you know, it's not just have some events and have Bike to Work Week. Or there's going to be significant investment required. And we're Mark Hamilton, who's the chair of the Bicycle Committee, and I are going to have a conversation with the Bike League in the coming weeks to find out more about what it is that is needed, since we did everything they said the last time, and we came up way short. So that's what that's about.
Is the Greenway item, when I read through the resolution,
Yep.
are we mostly just talking about signing that? That's essentially what that
That's
is.
the expensive part, but then there would also be social media promotion, events to encourage people. But the idea is that, I'll tell this story here, I don't think everybody here has heard it. My wife and a friend were campaigning during the fall election up around the Leopold neighborhood, and they were trying to get people out to early vote. And they said, you know, the clerk is open these 2 weeks. You can go down and vote today or any day during business hours. I said, that doesn't make any sense. I live in Fitchburg. Why would I have to go down to Martin Luther King Boulevard to vote? And the problem is that these people who are living, many of the people in that neighborhood have never been south of McKee Road because the transit doesn't come here. And they don't know that we have a senior center and a city hall and a community center and a splash pad and a dog park. And those things are very reachable by foot or bicycle. And so there will be a sign with this grant that will say the Civic Campus is 2.1 miles this way down this wonderful path with lights all the way. And, you know, you can take a B-cycle, or you can take your own bicycle, or you can walk. You can push your stroller. And even if you don't have a car, you can enjoy some of the things that Fitchburg has to offer. So that was the idea. And we're approaching it with an equity focus. By we, I mean Bike Fitchburg.
That's another reason why I am very supportive of the study we're doing for the shuttle and the senior center shuttle, but I think that it's equally important that we made a conscious choice to build our library here, and we need to allow people that live in North Fitchburg to get to that library. And that's just as important as people getting to the senior center.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that is getting to the civic campus. And there's a library, there's a senior center, there's a place services people to do court functions, and they can tickets, they have to come up here. And of course, City Hall and all the meetings and stuff that goes on. So all of those things are part of them.
Court days, you see taxis coming around here a lot because people have to come from wherever they live to have their Fitchburg court appearance.
Are you speaking from experience?
Yep. I have been to our court, but never as a defendant.
As that would.
So whatever happened to the on-demand car thing they had a few years ago where they stopped at metro stops and picked people up? They ran, I mean, I know it was probably a pilot thing.
Yeah, that was Fitchburg project and not Metro.
Right, but I mean, they had signage at metro stops.
Yeah,
That's what I meant.
yeah, you could get.
I don't think it was very well, it wasn't
It wasn't well
utilized at all,
utilized.
so then.
Yeah, we went over it when we were talking about this study. I think it
Oh.
was used, I think there was a very small number of people that made up like 90% of the usage of it.
And it was a pilot study,
Right.
so, yeah.
So. Never mind, why nobody used it.
It doesn't fit the model of transit that other people.
That was within the Fitchburg camp area that they were going around.
It's only within the city's urban service area.
Hey, look now, the Madison Metro is, people, all the bus stops are not being used anymore, they're closed everywhere in my neighborhood.
The metro stops are closed.
The new system has a lot of bus stops
Yes.
that are no longer active. Let's move on to, do you have a report for us, Tim, or?
I do.
Make Ross do it.
Well, Ross is the big component of the report, is just that Ross started officially as a transportation engineer on Monday, so we can begin to work on such things as the transit study and other items that have been kind of pushed off just because we haven't had staffing. So that's really the big and only item I had.
We're so glad.
So we have to treat him nice so he doesn't leave. So go easy on him.
When I started, the transportation department was empty. Now we're the only fully staffed public works department. So.
You still live way out by the Happy Barn?
I'll come walk now.
Yeah.
So a little closer, but only by like 5 minutes. I'm slowly coming this way.
Okay.
Take a while to get all the way here.
All right, so my idea for this agenda item number 8 is that we have representatives by ordinance on this committee from these other bodies, so we should hear any transportation-related news from those other bodies. So first up would be Bill J., our Common Council representative. Anything to report?
I'll go through a long list pretty quickly here, and you guys can stop me when you want to hear something that pricks your ears. We'll start back in May, since that's the last time this body met, but Gervasi over by Southside and McCoy was, I don't even know where this is, with his new septic tank that he wants, and his idea was he wanted a restaurant, which could affect transportation in that area, so I figured, let's mention it. The South Stoner Prairie neighborhood plan appears to be moving along, so that's obviously going to affect, traffic on Lacey Road and probably every residential neighborhood.
Does everybody know where that is?
Southwest corner of.
That's the south side. It's the area south of Lacey Road and west of Seminole Highway. And it will have a subdivision just south on the Fitcherona end. And it will have the Edgewood.
Is that the Fitch Road end? Is it? That's like halfway between, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
So
so.
there's a subdivision in that little valley that runs parallel with Fitcherona Road between the Hammersley Quarry and Fitcherona Road.
There's another quarry, so there's Hammersley and then
Fitchburg Minerals.
Is it Fitchburg Minerals?
Fitchburg Minerals is not a quarry yet, right?
Not yet.
Right.
But I believe they have
west of Seminole Highway, south of Lacey Road.
Oh,
I got it, yeah, okay, no.
Yeah, it's my understanding we got to pick rocks out of there for like 5 years before
Yes.
we can build, which sounds like a fabulous idea.
By hand too, right?
By the way, that quarry is the reason that having a truck route system is on that list. Because if you have weight limits and a designated truck route system, then you can prevent quarry trucks from going down Commerce Park Drive. If you really are, Seminole Highway, when you really want them to go down Commerce Park Drive or things like that.
There was a bit of controversy, but the council eventually passed Resolution R-11223 supporting a joint application for USDOT charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant program. So basically, there's money to be had for putting EV charge infrastructure within Dane County, and Fitchburg will be involved with that planning. So perhaps Mr. Ross here.
Why was that controversial?
It was, well, because Dave Herbst was opposed to it on moral ground because the government is spending money it doesn't have, and at least one other council member who would have voted for it was absent at the time, and it was a budget amendment. It needed 2/3, so we actually came back a week later when everybody could be there.
Thank you.
Okay. So there was that incident over in Highfield Reserve where there was a pedestrian bike easement thing that, somebody overstepped their bounds. At any rate, it's all settled, but you want to say a little more about that at all? Like the developer put in the bike lane and/or sidewalk, and he did it in the city's easement.
Yeah, well, I think they constructed, this was the agenda item on the Board of Public Works.
Yeah.
So they constructed a sidewalk not where they were supposed, outside the designated easement. So what they could have done was either rip it up and reinstall it within the easement, or just give us a new sketch and legal for where it was installed. So we kind of gave them two options. They chose the second option, which was just provide a new sketch and legal for it. So
Is that the one that's over the ridge from Fahey Fields? Is that where that
I
is?
don't recall.
That's like south of Nobel.
Yeah, I would have to.
South of
that
the
was
Nobel roundabout?
Yeah, that was early June, I think we went on that.
June 13th, it came before council, so it would have been
End of May, early June, so.
Pepper Construction has been selected to manage construction of the new police facility, which is going to be here on the Civic campus, which will have traffic implications.
Not across Research Park Drive?
Yes, yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, adjacent to the current campus?
Yes,
An
correct.
extension thereof, okay.
I was considering this entire area,
Okay.
yeah, the entire property. Hartung Fields, as we discussed that earlier. At our most recent council meeting, we were presented with the TID 10 expansion on North Fish Hatchery Road, TID 16 in Southdale, and TID 17. 16 and 17 will be brand new this year. 17 is on the west side of Verona Road. So there's neighborhood plans involved there, and obviously going to have transportation implications. There will be a new development going in on Orchard Point, so right behind Target, those senior apartments. There's a 3.5 acre plot right next door to those senior apartments. There will be a new development going up there as well. It's kind of interesting because the developer was talking about how he loves the walkability for our residents and our staff, but it's going to be a memory care facility and an assisted living center, so I'm not sure how much walking those residents will actually be doing. And then at our committee of the whole, we discussed alternative revenue streams outside of property taxes, and that included a transportation utility and a wheel tax, which are on our list here. That's the full update. Don't ever skip a meeting again.
So, sorry, where do those two things stand? The transportation utility and wheel tax, that's,
Those were two of the possible alternative revenue streams that the city might consider taking advantage of.
but, so somebody's thinking about that or preparing a recommendation? What, I mean, I understand.
Yeah, it was just a
It's basically
education item.
committee of the whole is basically a show and tell.
Yeah.
Are you interested in that? I wanted to discuss.
Well, I'm curious about it. It sounds like a way to get yourself unelected from city council.
Well, it depends. The important thing is to make sure that people understand what they're getting and then to deliver it. There was a big kerfuffle about having a wheel tax in Madison to fund BRT, and then that money didn't seem to go to BRT. So we'll see how she does.
Yeah, I looked up when I was going through the packet, I tried to search for how many municipalities in Wisconsin had wheel taxes. And I was having some trouble with that, but.
I have a list in the
It's
packet.
in the packet here.
Oh, I didn't see it in mine.
Okay, is that it, Bill?
Yes, one administrative item in the future, Steve, when you, and this is either, I guess it's you and or Dina, but the agenda packet was largely a bunch of images instead of texts. So like if you just hit Control F and try and search for something, you're not going to find it because you have to instead scroll and manually find it with your eyeballs.
I sent her PDFs and web pages and so on. So I think that if she printed and scanned them, that would do that. That's one way to put the agenda packet together.
Too quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
You did, like Rich said, you're not giving her enough time.
We could probably mostly the website ones, because that's kind of difficult to like convert to a PDF and put in the packet. I would guess that then those probably got printed and scanned back in.
Next time I'll try to assemble the whole thing as one PDF, and then she will be doing that. Okay, any questions for Bill? Jay? Seeing none, anything from, okay, so we don't have a representative from the Board of Public Works. Do you have anything, Tim, that you would share with us that should be important?
I can just kind of give some updates on our construction projects going on.
Why don't you do that?
So Lacey Road is currently under construction. We have the Seminole Highway and Lacey Road intersection shut down, looking to have that reopened prior to the school year, which is August 20th, a little over a month away. And then it's also closed from that intersection all the way west to Fitchburg, looking to have that complete by November, Ross?
Yeah, November 17th.
17th.
Yeah.
Sain Road is still under construction. We got put on hold for several weeks. Some utility conflicts with MG&E poles, and then there was one particular pole that was sitting in a curb line that we can't install the curb. It's still there. So then we had to wait for cable, AT&T to get off the pole. Charter, I believe, is the last one, and we're hoping by Sunday that they're off, that pole can be removed, and then we can finish that intersection. And then once Lacey and Sain is open, East Sherrill and Sain will be closed, and then hoping to have the project wrapped up in October.
Thank you. Those are the biggies.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
What are next year's big ones?
So next year's big one was going to be Sain Phase 2 and 3, which is from East Sherrill north to the McCoy intersection. However, it's looking that that's going to get pushed to 2025, so that next year Sain won't have any construction going on. there's been a holdup with, it's called a 4F and 6F letter. And that letter is required because there's Dane County parklands that have to be swapped as part of the intersection realignment. So that letter's taken longer to go through the process. So in order to meet the grant deadline, we had to push it back a little bit.
So it's definitely pushed out.
Not definitely, but it's looking like that right now.
So will that only be the McCoy intersection? Will it also delay the completion of the north end of South Sain?
What do you mean by the north end of South Side? By East Sherrill?
Between
North
Yeah, so phase two.
to the fire station.
Yeah, phase two
West
was, I mean, yes. So phase two was several hundred feet north of that intersection to just south of the McCoy intersection. So yeah, that would be delayed also.
So Nineberg and Sain, is that going to be done next year? Or is that-
No, that would be 2025. And we may be able to start it late 2024, but not much is going to happen in September or October. Most of that work would happen the following year, 2025. So
When that is supposed to be done in fall here. I live on Nineberg, so.
Rich, could you?
Nothing
Nothing to report from plan.
I'm neglected, so.
Very
But I
good.
wasn't aware.
Okay, well, that's your homework assignment for
You
next
got it.
month is to bring us anything that's of interest.
Yeah, and that, I can.
Others is just so that we can take any other reports that might come up, but I don't know of any other, if somebody wants to tell us about bicycle committee or the senior center makes some action on transit or something like that, we'll have it here. Is there anything, we've talked quite a bit about our agenda for next month. Is there anything else that people need to have on the agenda for next month?
The Dane County
Park and ride?
Park and Ride grant, is that something we want to try and take advantage of? And that's PARC, whatever that stands for.
Yep, parks and something. Anyway, we have used these for the Dolly Bike Hub, paid for part of that. I'm trying to remember what are some of the other things. One of the ideas to get a bike link between the Stewart Street Industrial Park and South Sain Road because of wetland considerations is to run a boardwalk along Sain Road, and that would be a reasonable kind of thing. It is a 50% match. It's not like the 80% you get from the federal transportation alternatives.
And the county, I think, has $500,000 total grant money to handle.
Right, so you can't build bridges over the Beltline or anything like that with that kind of money. By comparison, back when it was built, like in 2009, the bridge over Fish Hatchery Road was $1 million. So it gives you a kind of a scale of what kind of projects we could do. But Park and Ride is intended to connect, per Joe Parisi, the villages and cities of Dane County and Dane County's parks. So for example, the Lower Yahara River Trail is like right in the wheelhouse of that. But for example, if we could figure out a way to get bikes and pedestrians to Oregon from here safely, that would be a good use of that. And that would probably fit into that kind of the goals of that program.
Just a small update on that.
Sure.
Tim, Tracy, Phil, Groupie, and Scott Endel, we all have a meeting to discuss Park and Ride and TAP grant opportunities in 2 weeks, I believe. So interdepartmental brainstorm meeting.
So mail your ideas to Ross. All right. We will meet again on August 10th. Let me know if you can't be here, if you learned of that.
I'll tell you right now, I will I have no idea right now. I will be somewhere. I will be somewhere in the middle of Wyoming.
Oh, okay.
And
Definitely not here.
definitely, yeah, we'll be here. So I mean, I'm driving home from there, and so if I am at my hotel by then, I can zoom in.
Okay.
If I am in the middle of Wyoming, I may not have service. But-
Okay, so we all get, I think, do we all get these Zoom invitations every? All right. I appreciate everybody coming in person, but of course, it's way better, if you're sick and can still Zoom in or out of the city. That's always appreciated too, so let us know.
Yeah, and if I can't make it, I'll send some, whatever feedback I have on the list of
Okay.
things in advance. Yeah, so.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We are adjourned.